It's a couple of minutes after the hour, so maybe we can go ahead and get started. Welcome again to everyone who's joining us. We like to start workshops with a statement of solidarity, acknowledging that the pandemic and other structural inequalities have disproportionately affected people of color, particularly Black and Indigenous peoples. So as members of the UCR community, we stand with Black Lives Matter and AAPI communities against racism, xenophobia, and human rights violations. We also want to recognize our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, the Cahuilla, Tongva, Luceño, and Serrano peoples, as well as their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. And while we're presently meeting online in digital spaces, we invite you to, if you're not aware, learn whose ancestral lands you're physically located on. One place you can do that is the link on the screen. It's native-land.ca. So again, welcome. For this workshop, absolutely do what's best for you. Feel free to engage any way you're comfortable. We'll be monitoring chat throughout, and we are recording this, and we'll make the recording available on the library's YouTube page afterwards. So we can start by introducing ourselves. I'm Rachel Starry. I'm the Digital Scholarship Librarian here at UC Riverside Library.
And I'm Janet Reyes, the Geospatial Information Librarian here at UCR Library.
Yeah, so today we have kind of two goals for this particular workshop. We are hoping that folks who participate today will become familiar with some of the geospatial resources that are available in library research guides, which we'll probably refer to informally throughout today as LibGuides. And we also want to build some awareness of some of the geospatial tools that are out there, and specifically the tools that we here support in UCR Library, as well as how you might select from among them for accomplishing different tasks related to your research or creating maps. So specifically, what we will cover today is what we're calling the digital mapping or GIS and digital mapping tool matrix. This is an online resource that we'll be showcasing and walking through. We'll talk about where it's found, how it's structured, how it might be useful to you, as well as what related information is available about the different software and tools in the matrix itself, including capsule summaries on Janet's Maps and GIS LibGuide. And then in the second half of the workshop, we will be doing brief demonstrations of 3 selected tools. One tool that is one tool for each of these categories, which we've divided the matrix out into, and which we'll look at, which are making maps, analyzing spatial data, and telling stories with maps, creating narratives. So we would love to hear from you all. Feel free to introduce yourself in chat. Be really interesting to hear what disciplines and departments you're all coming from. And in particular, if there's anything you are really interested in learning about today, that would be helpful for us to hear. And then we've prepared a couple of polls to kind of learn more about where you're all coming from.
Right, so while you might be introducing yourself in the chat or whatever, let me launch the first poll question as well. Let's see. So what's your level of familiarity working with spatial data? Okay.
Yep, yeah.
So that's what we've got for our answers there. Just a lot, but looks like nobody here today has never worked with geospatial data. So we have one more question. Let's go with this one, your research needs. Okay, so it looks like folks in attendance today, we touched on all of these categories, which is great. It's very common. So um, thank you very much for your participation in these poll questions.
Yeah, it's great to see a spread of interest. So we'll talk about each of these different sorts of use cases, and hopefully the demos will be useful. So I'm going to close my view of the poll. Awesome, and welcome again. So with that, we'll go ahead and take a look at the GIS and digital mapping tool matrix itself, the resource that we planned this workshop around. So we first want to look at how to find it. So there's a couple ways you can navigate to this matrix. You can either go onto the library's website, library.ucr.edu, and do a search for maps and GIS, and I'll do that now. So you can just search in the big search bar here. Maps and GIS is the best search to pull it up quickly. You'll want to look down here. So usually when you're searching for articles or books, you'll want to look under UC Library Search. But in this case, the resource itself lives on one of the library guides. So you can search for any library guide right there in the main search bar on the website. But this is the Maps and GIS guide, which Janet will be talking about more in detail. So that's one way to find it. Another way is if you're on the library homepage, you can actually navigate down under the popular box here. There's a link right to the research guides, so you can actually browse for a variety of different research guides on many different subjects. So the category we're interested in for this one is maps and geospatial information. So if you click on that, you'll see all the LibGuides that are available that have something to do with this category. And there again, you'll be able to find the Maps and GIS guide. And Janet just shared a link right to the guide itself if you're curious to check it out. So that's how to find it. So what is it? Essentially, the matrix is a spreadsheet, and it is a tool that summarizes what are the pieces of software or tools or web apps or websites that are out there for GIS and mapping that the UCR library currently supports. And more than just what's out there, how do they all compare to each other in terms of basic functionality, cost and availability, what sorts of data you can bring into them, what sorts of maps and images and other output options you can get out of them, and much more. And I'll call out that all of the tools that we have on this matrix are tools which are free to use and available without cost to researchers here at UC Riverside. If you're not affiliated with UCR, many of these will still be free to use, but some of them might be licensed software that you may or may not have access to. So essentially, this is the resource. It is this tab that we're on right now is the main view of the matrix, and it includes all 16 tools that we have researched and that the library currently supports that are related to GIS and digital mapping. We have organized them into a couple of different categories. So we can see here that there are the Esri products, the ArcGIS Pro and Online, and StoryMaps, kind of the industry leading standard for GIS. We also have the Google products, Google My Maps, and Google Earth. There are a number of open source tools and free to use tools. So the difference here being the open source tools are, of course, themselves also free to use, but their source code's also open. So these tools tend to have a kind of robust user community of people who are creating and supporting and using these tools for different sorts of projects and research. And then the free to use tools, many of them are proprietary tools created by companies that earn their revenue from other sources, or that have a what's called freemium tier, where there is a free version of the tool, but then you can also pay for additional features or access or storage, things like that. We also have included 2 library databases, PolicyMap and Social Explorer, and we'll actually be looking at PolicyMap a bit later. And these are databases that include a ton of data that is, geo-referenced or geospatial in some way. So essentially, this matrix kind of breaks down across all these different tools and categories. What are the basic functionality? How do you access these different things? Which sorts of cartography or spatial analysis capabilities? So this is a high-level overview. If you're curious, I really need a tool that's going to let me do map animation. You want to have map animation. You can kind of at a glance see across these tools which ones will or will not allow you to, do that. And yeah, we can share a link directly to this. Again, you can access it by searching for maps and GIS on the library website or navigating to Janet's Maps and GIS library guide. But great questions. So let's see, that is the main overview of the matrix itself, but we also have 3 sub tables. So we have one each for 3 different main purposes that we know we get a lot of questions and that researchers here are interested in doing. So we get a lot of questions about folks who want to make maps. So we've grouped tools on here that are primarily related to making maps. We also have a tab for tools that are geared towards analyzing spatial data, including more of the GIS tools and the databases, as well as the 3 tools that allow you to create narratives with maps, more detailed, what are kind of commonly called story maps or infographics even that include maps. So these are the 3 tools for that. So again, these slides here are for reference, kind of summarizing what I just pointed to. So we've got the All Tools tab that lets you compare across all 16 tools. They're grouped into different categories, and then we have 3 different tabs for those 3 different kind of buckets or categories of purposes for research or writing or publication that we've identified. And with that, I will turn things over to Janet to talk more in detail about the LibGuide.
Thank you, Rachel. I just wanted to respond to Amos's question about credits for Esri products. So the answer is there is an allocation. It's very generous. And my understanding in working with Esri representatives is that if somebody is running low, it's not a problem to replenish their credits. So pretty much it's fairly easy to do whatever you need to do and not worry about consuming too many credits. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen. So, slideshow. There we go. Yeah, so now what I'll do is talking about another aspect of what we put together to supplement or complement the matrix that Rachel explained. And we're calling it the Geospatial Tool Guide. And where can you find this? Well, again, here is a slide that shows you the Maps in GIS library guide or LibGuide. And then to start accessing the part that we're talking about today, you would want to go to this, this tab right here that says Geospatial Tools. So let me get over to that and we'll take a look at it live. Oops, sorry, my my controls are in the way, so I will hide them. There we go. So this is the Geospatial Tools page that you see on the library guide. And here's a link to that matrix that Rachel was just talking about. But we also wanted to get into a little more depth about each of the 16 tools. So this is the idea behind these 3 subpages, again, corresponding to the 3 other matrices that Rachel explained about whether you want to make a map or analyze spatial data or create a narrative with maps. We've got a separate page for each of those. And we should note that a tool sometimes does more than one of those three things. Some of them do all of those things. So we just had to kind of break it into one category or another just for the ease of manipulating all these, but just do recognize that there are some overlaps between these different functionalities. In the tool description, we wanted to have some at-a-glance type of indication for some of the things that people are most concerned about when they're thinking about using a tool. So one set of icons that we developed is about the learning curve, right? Like how much time am I going to have to take getting up to speed with this tool before I can really start using it in a meaningful way? And so we have the three little clock faces showing you this tool might just be an hour, maybe a lot less than an hour to learn. Some might be just a few hours, and some is going to take a while. You'll be there for a while. And those are especially some of the tools that allow you to do spatial analysis. And then another thing you might want to know right off the bat is this something I can use online from a browser, or do I need to download and install it? So let's take a look at one of the pages here, the one that for making a map. So all the pages are laid out pretty much the same way. We start with talking about the general concept of what this is about. And then also, remember, Rachel showed you the main matrix and then the other tabs on the matrix. If you just want a standalone thing to look at regarding, in this case, the tools for making a map, we have that created that you could just link to here, and I'll show you. It looks like that. It's a PDF of that table. So just nice at a glance comparison of all the features. And at the heading level, these are all live links to the websites for these tools. So hopefully that would help you explore a little bit more if it seems like this is the tool I want to use, but let me make sure, I'm making a good choice. You can just click on that link. And then down below, what we've done is create kind of capsule descriptions of each of these tools for making maps in this case. So you see, again, there's where our icons come in. And again, we have a live link to the web page for the tool. Then each of these has a brief description of what it is, how to access it. So that's kind of important because we work for UCR Library. When we talk about accessing these tools, we have focused on UCR affiliates and what they can do to access the tools. So understand that if you are tuning in from a different institution or somewhere else, of course, some of these things may not work for you, but yeah, this is how it goes at UCR. And then where to get help. That's always something I need to know, is if I get stuck or get confused, which is pretty common. I want to know where I can look at the frequently asked questions or some other resources. So we've tried to provide that for each of these tools. So the other tool pages for making or analyzing spatial data and telling a narrative with maps, they're laid out in the same fashion. So that's pretty much how you can use this section of the library guide for finding out what kind of tool might work best for your needs. So with that, I'm going to pause for a second, and then we'll go to the other portion of our workshop, which is a demonstration of one tool from each of these three categories. So I'll pause and just see if anybody has any questions on what we've presented so far.
Janet, if I could ask, based on the matrix, it looks like things like ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS Desktop do the same thing. Are they the same application or are they different?
That's a great question. And the answer is the ArcMap or ArcGIS Desktop was the tool that has been out there from Esri, who's the company that makes these tools, from the year 2000 up till now. But ArcGIS Pro is like the next generation. So they introduced that, I think, in 2015, 2016, and they're wanting people to transition over to using Pro. So support for ArcMap is going to diminish. It already has started to diminish, and it'll be totally phased out probably, I think 2026 is the year. So they do a lot of the same things because one's like taking the place of the first one. If that makes sense,
yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so with that, we get to the demo portion of this workshop, and what we try to use as a guiding principle on picking which tool to demonstrate to you guys is one that is not already covered by a workshop I have given in the past. So I think later on we'll be sharing maybe a link to the library's YouTube channel where some of these workshops have been recorded. So for some things about ArcGIS Online or Google products and things, there's a workshop that's already recorded. But I'm going to go down here and point out Scribble Maps, which is a tool I discovered a few years ago, and it's really well adapted for if you want to make an interactive online map to share with folks. And this is one of those tools that it has like that freemium kind of feel to it. So there is a portion that you can use for free, but then if you want extra functionality, that's where it starts to get into, you would have to pay some money for that. So let's take a look at Scribble Maps. So first, before we get to the tool itself, I have scrolled down to the bottom of the Scribble Maps webpage, and this shows you that freemium concept, right? So the thing that we're going to look at in just a minute is this free version. So you see it does some things, and it does some things very well, but doesn't have a lot of functionality, but it's free. So sometimes that's all you need. However, if you did want to upgrade to Pro Basic, it's got a lot more it can do. It would cost you about $20 a month, but there is a free 3-day trial. So that's an option for you as well, as if you're trying to create a map in the Scribble Maps free version and you think, oh, I really need like a better resolution for what I want to download or some of these other functions. You might be able to create your map in 3 days during the trial period and still not have to pay for anything. So be aware of that. And then this is like for big companies and things like that. So probably we here today are not super interested in Pro business. So let me tab over now to Scribble Maps, the free version. And I have already zoomed into our campus area. So this should look familiar to some of you. You see they're trying to entice you to upgrade over here to the Pro version, but let me just close that for now. So if this view looks familiar to you, it probably does, because they offer a range of base maps, which is like the information in the background on which you would add your information. So this is Google, and this is the default, but this is not the only thing that they offer. And in fact, if I click on this down here in the lower right-hand corner, they give me 4 different choices from among Google products, in addition to the hybrid, which is having the imagery plus the labels on it. So for instance, if I wanted to pick the roadmap from Google, I get something that looks like this. And then you can even have more options. If I click this custom button, this allows me to turn on and off some of the features on this map. So for instance, I might think that all of these marker symbols are just too much, like they're cluttering my map or something. So I can go off over here and turn off the points of interest, and then I don't have them on my map, and then I can draw what I want on the map, So that's kind of nice. You see there's other things that you can turn on and off or change the color and whatnot. This only works for the Google set of products that they offer. So Google is not the only choice, like I said. That's about 8 or 9 other choices that you can use for your base map. So let me just click on the Scribble Maps option, which is a pretty nice map, I think. And of course, you can zoom in and out. I'm just staying at one zoom level just to make this easier presentation. But I want to now direct your attention over here to the tools in the upper left corner. And I will start by talking about drawing lines. So you have a couple options there. This tool allows you to draw a freehand line on the map. This tool allows you to draw straight line segments. So, you know, no curves or anything like that, just point to point to point. Over here, there are options for making your lines thinner or fatter and changing the color and all that good kind of stuff. For shapes, you have the option of either drawing a rectangle or a circle or a polygon. And as I hover here, it's showing you what that means. So it's drawing a shape that's not necessarily a rectangle or a circle is pretty much it. You have text options. And again, there are options for what that's going to look like. And you can even create a pop-up. So it might include an image, like a ground photo, say, for the thing that you're labeling. So that's kind of nice to have for a free tool. There are several choices for markers, which are point features. Let me just click on this. And you can see they have all these different icons, and you can change the size of the icons. You know, standard ones are available too. So if you wanted the paddles, you have that, or the push pins, or some of the other standard shapes. They're trying to hit a range of users. So there's some really specific types of symbols and things that they've included just in case you are a person who's trying to sell houses or something like that. So they have some pretty specialized symbols there. There's also even some isometric symbols here, which, yeah, kind of like pictures of vehicles or people, all kinds of things. So they get quite creative with how you can represent point features. Another nice feature, I think, for Scribble Maps to include is this split tool. So if you've drawn something and you want to break it apart, they have a tool that allows you to do that. And then this tool over here is kind of a nice multi-purpose tool. I won't say all function. So it allows you to change the shape of something you've drawn, like a line or a polygon. It allows you to move things around. And if you hover in a certain place, you can get the dimensions of a length of your polygon's perimeter or your line length or something like that. So that's a really nice ability to have. The last thing I want to say here is I'm going to click on this menu over here. And this menu pops up. Just because you see all of these things in the free version does not mean that you can use them in the free version, but they're pretty straightforward on telling you, for instance, if I wanted to save this as a KML, which is something that would go into a Google product, it says, no, you can't do that. You got to upgrade to Pro Basic. So they'll let you know. But pretty much what you can do is save your map to the cloud or save it to the computer. And then down here, you can get an embed code or a link to email the map or to share the map. And you can save the image or the PDF. However, I don't know if you noticed from that description on the website is that the resolution on the free version is not so great. So might do great for a thumbnail map, but for something that you're going to print at a larger dimensions, then maybe this would not be the best tool for you to use for that unless you upgrade to the Pro version. So another helpful thing here is the manual. And I have seen many different help manuals and things, and I think this one is pretty comprehensive. They really do cover it well and they explain in clear language. So I do like that about this tool. Another way to get to the manual is down here on the bottom right bar down here. There's a link to the manual. So so that's pretty much it with Scribble Maps. I think if you wanted to make a a fairly simple map, maybe do a little bit of measurement or something like that, and then share it with folks, it's a pretty good tool to consider. Again, with the free version, you can create up to 5 maps. So it'll let you save 5 maps when you create an account. So for some people, that's all they need, just every once in a while they need to make a map. So this could be a good tool. Does anybody have any questions on this example of a tool that helps you just make a map?
Janet, can you import data into this map, or is it just editing maps that are already there?
So let's see. For instance, this is a load from computer that you would need the pro version for that. Yeah.
Okay.
And
does the Google My Maps, is it similar to Scribble Maps, or is it different in function?
Well, let me think. It's been a while since I looked at Google My Maps. It's very similar. One of the things to realize about Google My Maps is that for some reason, when you have a UCR Google account, you cannot use Google My Maps. That's not part of what's included. So if you wanted to use or try out Google My Maps, what you would need is your own Google account and get into it that way. But yeah, you can create points, lines, and polygons in Google My Maps and share it with other folks and all that. But yeah, I would need to refresh my memory on some of the other functions that you can do in it.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so that's a tool that helps you make a map. Now let's take a tool, look at a tool that you can do some analysis with. And what I've chosen is PolicyMap. Now I have done a workshop with PolicyMap in the past, but it's one of the tools that is most straightforward to learn. So I thought it may be most useful to present on it a little bit here. So as Rachel mentioned, PolicyMap is something that is a database that's available through the library website. So I'm going to kind of walk you through how you would find it. So here I am on the landing page of our library's website. And down here, we can go to databases. And then if you know the name of the database you want, which in my case is PolicyMap, I can just type it in that search box. And then I would click on this link to bring it up. So that's how you find it. Now I've already pulled it up. So let me click on over there. And again, I've already zoomed into our local area to save you the headache of me zooming in from way out, zoomed way out. But PolicyMap covers information related to the United States only. It has, as you can see, these 10 basic categories of data. So this is a place you would come for accessing data that's already been collected by other resources. So we have demographics, incomes and spending, quality of life, economy, education, health. So it's all related to policy and social health, social justice concerns, pretty much. If you wanted to get a feel for what data is available in PolicyMap at a glance, what you'd want to do is go over here to this data directory. If I click on that, it takes you to this very long chart that goes category by category here and shows you exactly the types of information that are available in PolicyMap. But it's a grid that also shows you for what years that data is available. And then also what I call it granularity it is available for. So is it only at the county level, or can you go down to census tracts, or can you have it as school district level data? So that's a very useful way to see if PolicyMap has the type of data that you're interested in. Another way you can search for that is up here. You can search for a type of data and see what comes up. And again, if you know your location, you can type it in up here and find out that way. I like exploring tab by tab myself. So let me just go to demographics here, and I'll show you that sometimes there's categories and subcategories and sometimes subcategories, right? So you can get it pretty pretty granular in terms of what type of data you're looking at. For now, I'm just going to pick population density. And I should note that most of these are represented as polygons or shapes, but there are some data in here that are point features, such as, I know they have banks, they have supermarkets, they have libraries, hooray. And one I like to look at sometimes is bridges that have been judged unsafe. So I'm always kind of interested in that one too. So that gives you a feel for some of the point data that's available. So with PolicyMap, they use this purple color ramp as the default, but you are not stuck with that. If you would rather use a different color, there's up to 7 other ramps you can pick from, and you can invert the colors so that they go from dark to light if that works better for your data. The default is to have 5 ranges, the data split into 5 ranges by value, but you are not stuck with that. You can make it as many as 8 ranges, or you can make it 2. Like if you have a value that's of interest and you just want to know everything that's above that value and below that value, you can set it up that way for the visualization. So that's kind of good to know. At this zoom level I'm in right now, we're looking at zip code tabulation. However, if I zoomed in, I would probably get population density represented by census tract. If I zoomed out, it might pop back to, say, the county level or the metropolitan statistical area level, that kind of thing. But if you are just interested in one type of granularity, you can put a lock on it. So that's the only one you'll see, no matter whether you zoom in or out. As you can see, I'm just moving my mouse around and it's automatically telling me what the value is. I can turn that feature off, which I like to do. However, let me just click on, say, this polygon. If I actually click on it, I get this little pop-up, and you've got some options here. One thing that I like to, I'll tell you briefly that you can get reports that are pretty standardized. So like for this zip code tabulation area, I can get a tabular printout that has common things regarding that community, also a rental housing report and so forth. If you are really interested in tables that are kind of related to the data that's in PolicyMap, that you're looking at the map itself, honestly, what I'll give you a tip, I think it's better to go up here at the top where it says PolicyMap Legacy. That was the previous version of PolicyMap, and they haven't quite migrated all of the functions for creating tables from your data from the legacy PolicyMap to this version of PolicyMap. So you might need to go over there if you're interested in tabular data. I do want to show you, for instance, though, this trends is kind of interesting. So what they do is for a particular polygon that you've selected, you can see how it compares for this value to other areas that it's nested in. And then you can also click on, if you wanted to see how it compares to all its neighboring zip code tabulation areas, you can get that information. So, and it's available for download, which is pretty good. So one way we get to the analysis part of PolicyMap, another way to get to it is, you see this is talking about single versus multiple layers. So right now I've just been showing you one layer, but you have the ability to add up to 5 different layers. So let me show you briefly how that works. This may not be an absolutely wonderful demonstration, but for instance, right now it's made the whole map one shade of purple because we're just looking at population density, but any place that has a population density is all shaded the same. But what you can do is maybe slide this over and maybe slide this up from 0, and you just get, like, say, a set of census tracts in this case that fit that particular range of population density, whatever it is. And then you could add another layer. So I could click on add layer here, and maybe I'd want to go to how about per capita income or something. So when I add that, it doesn't change the look of the map at first, but what I can do is again set my range. And then if I was only interested in maybe people who are below the modal per capita income, it might change the representation of polygons, so that, in other words, the polygons that you'll see shaded are all the ones that have a certain value that you've set for, in this case, population density, and it also has a certain range of value for per capita income. They even allow you to do or if that meets your analysis needs, instead of the ones that where both of those things are true, it's like where either of those things are true. So you'll get that represented on the map. So I'm going to stop there, and I hope that was a helpful demonstration of PolicyMap. Rachel's got one more tool to demonstrate for you, and that's going to be something about creating a narrative with maps.
Yes, and there was a question in chat about so the access to this particular database is through UCR Library. So is there a free version of PolicyMap, or what can you access on the generic policymap.com without institutional access?
Ooh, that's a good question. My understanding of their model is it's only offered through institutions. So I could be wrong about that, and maybe I'll get back to the person who asked that question after the workshop to make sure I'm telling you the right thing. So
yeah, and you've also offered a workshop right on PolicyMap and the other one,
Social Explorer.
Social Explorer, yeah. Yeah, so we have additional links to share with folks at the end where you can learn more. And yeah, I'm going to take over screen sharing now. All right, so the very last tool we wanted to demo for you today is StoryMapJS. So this falls into that third category of telling a narrative with maps. There are a variety of tools, and Janet has offered workshops on the Esri version of a similar tool called ArcGIS Story Maps. This one is another similar tool. It's open source. It was created by the folks at Night Lab, which is at Northwestern University. And it is one of a host of different tools created by Night Lab. So they have something called TimelineJS for creating interactive timelines. But essentially, StoryMapJS is a simple editor that allows you to create geographically anchored timelines or event timelines that are anchored in space somewhere. So this example here on their homepage kind of demonstrates what the tool itself looks like. So you start off with a base map that you can plot different types of media on. As we click through here, you can link out to do different types of media. Again, you can link to images. If it's pulling it in correctly, you can embed tweets. This has been taking a while to load, so I'm not 100% certain if that's just my connection. This is what happens if it tries to pull in a link that has changed or the link is broken. That's actually what that looks like. But you can bring in a variety of different types of media, and as you click through, you can kind of take somebody on a journey through a series of events or a story that is anchored in space. And that's kind of the fundamental instance of what it looks like. It really is aimed at kind of stories that have strong locations associated with them, where the media that you want to include is lives somewhere that you can pull it in from. So StoryMapJS can pull in media from a lot of different sources and a lot of different types. So you can upload images or pull in images from different sources online. In the past, you would be able to bring in images from places like Google Drive or Dropbox. That's no longer the case since those platforms changed their policies. GitHub is now an option for you to host images if you wanted to and pull them in here. There's even an option to use this tool not to have a map in the background, but a really big image. And GitHub is a great option for hosting those, what they call gigapixel images. Amazon Web Services is another cloud option if you needed to host images, but you can also pull in, as I mentioned, Twitter, like tweets. You can pull in vines and videos from YouTube and Vimeo, and many more different types of sources. They recommend keeping it short, and each slide or each piece of media does need to be affiliated with or anchored in some kind of space or some point on either the map or the background image. So this kind of a flexible variety of options for you in using this. So in addition to that kind of example they have here on their homepage, I wanted to show one other example of what this looks like if you take a story map and embed it on another web page. So this is an example here of a slightly older story that is on another website, and they've anchored or they've embedded their story map here. It's a story about the most expensive transfers in football history. So they have this base map here that's, we'll see what the options are for base maps when we look at the editor. But essentially you get this map in the background, all your points, they can or don't have to be connected by a line. And then you can add text on top of it. And then as you click through here, you can embed different pieces of media. So they've primarily brought in videos, like from YouTube, I believe is what they are mostly doing. But this text is fully editable. You can include links in here and all of that. So you don't have to have media if you don't want to. If you just want to have text about a place, you can do that. So this is one kind of option for embedding a story map. And as I mentioned, you can also use story maps when there is no map. It's useful if you wanted to take somebody on a tour of a very large image or other sort of, anything you want really that is two-dimensional and that you could create a very large image of. So this is an example where the story map actually walks through different sections of this piece of art. And it's moving through the different sections of the larger image in the same way that it would work if you had a map in the background and you were taking someone on a tour across the map. So that's another option for this tool. How do you access it and use it? So one thing I want to call out is that if you're familiar with this tool or if you've ever used it in the past, their access model has changed. So now all you need is to have a Google account. You can use your UCR Gmail account to log in and use their editor. They don't access your Google information. They just you just use it to connect to their editor. Let's actually pop over into the editor itself. So if you're up at the top of the page here, you can click on Make a Story Map, and that will take you into their editor. And again, you do have to have a Google account to be able to use this editor, but there are other options to use this tool, which is open source without a Google account. It's just a little more technically complex, and they have information on their GitHub site where they share all of that information, as well as their help pages, which I'll point to in a second. So you can create a new story map here. I'm actually going to click into one that I've already set up just to demo the interface. So on this editing interface here, you can preview the map. Right now it's very zoomed out. That's just the default, but there's also a preview pane to show what your story map will look like once you have published it. So right now I have just a very, very simple example with 3 different stops or slides with 3 different types of media, or rather one without media, just text. So again, the heading slide will always have your base map in the background with all the different points that you've plotted on there, and you can move through it. So in this case, I have an image that I'm pulling from Wikimedia Commons. Wikimedia is the image database that feeds into Wikipedia. You can also upload images here if you want to upload images from your computer. Here, if we create a new slide, you'll see what this looks like without any information in there. It creates a blank pin on the map. Again, you can choose to pull in media from a link, whether that's a link to a YouTube video or an image that lives somewhere online, or you can upload your own images. And then there's two boxes here where you can input the media credit, who created it, and caption. And it's always a best practice to, credit whoever created the media, and also to not reuse media that you don't have permission to reuse. We've actually done workshops in the past on image licensing and finding openly licensed images and public domain images. So we can share a link for that later if you're curious to learn more. And this caption box here, as well as the editor for the text that's going to appear overlaid on top of the map. It's a plain text editor, very, very streamlined, but you can also, if you want, use HTML tags to add things like links or to customize the appearance. So if you wanted to edit the HTML, you could do so. You could add in headers just using HTML tags. And then if I switch back out of that, we'll see it has properly formatted the HTML into a header. You can, again, pull in a variety of media types or just leave it blank. So it's just a plain piece of text description over your stop on the map. And this is an example of pulling in a YouTube video. Let's see, other things to note. A variety of base map options are available, as well as there's a few custom, or there's a few marker options. If you wanted, you can upload your own types of markers by uploading an image if you don't want to use the default. And in terms of base maps or background image, if you're not using a map, you can, oops, not there. Here under options, sorry, apologies, it's under the main options. That's where you choose your other details. So you can change the size of the story map. You can change the fonts that you're using here. This is where you would indicate whether or not you want those lines to appear if the background is a map versus one of those large images. It has a couple of different base map options. So Stamen Maps is an open source map provider. That's what that simple kind of black and white background looks like. There's also the OpenStreetMaps, which we saw on a couple of other tools. And you can also create your own base maps through Mapbox and link them in here. And then Gigapixel is that option if you are hosting a very large image. Oops. Okay. Change it back to toner. And again, this is what it ends up looking like once you've created it. And to answer the question in chat, yes, it is free and open source. And you can, again, use your UCR Gmail account if you would like to do that. So are there other questions about story maps? Or StoryMapJS, sorry, or anything else? I'll actually move back over now to finish up our slides. So if there aren't questions, as we've mentioned, Janet has offered a number of geospatial workshops in the past that have been recorded and added to the UCR Library YouTube page. We're at UCR Library on YouTube, including workshops specifically on many of the tools that are in the matrix that we showed today but didn't demo. So definitely check that out. There's also a digital scholarship research guide if you are interested in digital mapping and perhaps other sorts of digital research tools and methods. We offer support for things like text analysis and network analysis, digital publishing, those sorts of things. So definitely check that out. We've got a link again here to our slides. And before anyone pops away, although I know someone said they already had to run, we have a very, very brief 2-question workshop survey that helps us kind of offer better workshops, take your feedback into account, and refine things that we're offering. And you can always ask additional questions at the ask us button on the library website, or go to library.ucr.edu and the Ask a Librarian page. Yes, so the YouTube link is directly to the playlist of videos of workshops around GIS and digital mapping tools. But we've offered other workshops. The last link, the survey. I'll share that once again. Yeah, thank you all. Are there any other questions before we wrap up? I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Well, if not, thank you all so much for joining us today. It was great to see all of you here. Hopefully this was useful information, and we definitely would like to see you at future workshops. Always feel free to reach out if you have additional questions, or yes, definitely email questions or use the Ask Us button on the library website.
Yes, and I'll be sending out emails after this workshop. Might be later today, might be tomorrow morning, but it'll include another link again to the slides, and you'll have both of our email addresses so that you can respond or ask us follow-up questions.
Oh, we want a link? Yes, let's share a link again to the slides themselves.
Yeah, that was in my last.
Yeah, sometimes Zoom does that thing where it doesn't turn it into a clickable link. So just for convenience, there you go again, Jorge. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's, yeah, Zoom thing. Yeah, there's so much you can do with a lot of these tools. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.